everybody, welcome back to Country Girl. My name's Jarvis, and I'm out here actually relaxing a little bit before I go to a party. Wanted to be in a little bit of quietness and listen to the garden, just relax, and before I have the noise and stuff that is associated with a regular party. So you notice the jacket, it's a little cool this morning or this afternoon, and that's because fall is just around the corner, and that is a good time to think about your spring garden and your fall garden. The summer crops will soon be saying goodbye and will be replaced either by fall crops or by putting your garden to bed for the winter and thinking about next spring. And it's not too soon to think about next spring. One of the things that you can think about is the design of your garden. How's it looking? Is it the way you want it? Oops, ground's uneven here. Is it the way you want it? Are there changes you want to make? Now, I know a lot of you have started your gardens for the first time this year, and you've either succeeded or you've failed. And you haven't really failed, even if you didn't get a single crop. At least you've tried and you've learned something. And that's the important thing, is to learn as you go. And gardeners always love to experiment. So there's always some type of failure going on in a regular garden. This year, I couldn't grow cucumbers for any reason. Last year I had cucumbers, I was giving them away. But I couldn't grow a pumpkin. This year I could grow a pumpkin. So there's a lot of things that we can control and some things you can't control. So now's a good time to sit back and say, okay, what happened and what can I do to prevent it next year? And I know there's also people out there who have gone to the grocery store and discovered that the quality and the quantity of the produce food, isn't nearly as great, but the price has really gone up. And you're thinking about starting a garden for the first time this year. And again, fall is a good time to be thinking about that. There's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when building a garden. And the first thing is, what is a garden? A garden has got so many different definitions. Everyone has a different idea of what a garden is. I have over 50 garden beds, and I consider each one of those as its own individual garden. And each one has a theme or a specific crop that goes in, and they rotate from year to year, except for the flower gardens. The flower gardens are all but one are perennials, so I don't really have to do much about those. But if you're going to be making a kitchen garden, which would include your vegetables, your fruits, your berries, then you need to have a couple of things you need to look into. First of all, is location. You've heard it before, location, location, location. Location is everything when it comes to a garden. Your garden needs at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. It needs to be located near water so that you have access for watering. It also needs to be placed somewhere where you will see it, where it's convenient to walk out the door and go into the garden to do some work, or just sit and enjoy like I'm doing right now. You need to be able to see it. That way you won't forget it. You'll walk by it and you'll say, oh, there's a weed, and you'll pull the weed. You'll walk by it and look at those, like the green beans I just looked at, and say, oh, I need to harvest these. But if it's way back in the corner and you don't see it, those weeds sneak up on you. The harvest comes and goes, and the plants. Once a lot of these beans and peas and stuff, once they start to produce seeds and they dry up, that signals the plant that it's done. Same thing with tomatoes and peppers. And then you won't get any more harvest. So you have to keep up on the harvest all the time so it continues to produce until the weather kills it. I got some notes here. Oops, I just dropped my phone. All right. Another thing you need to consider is whether you want to do raised beds or in-ground beds or containers. You can garden any of those three different ways, and there's probably more ways. Well, hydroponic with water. There's all kinds of ways to garden, and you just have to experiment with what you want to try. I started out, oh gosh, a long time ago, doing a row garden. It didn't work for me. I was going to work, I had kids, and we had it way out back. All the things, it didn't need enough shade back, it didn't need the sun back there, all the things that added up to a failure, and that's what it did. So I quit gardening for a while, and then I read about the square foot garden method and raised beds. I tried that the first year. I really enjoyed the raised beds, not so much the square foot. I wanted to have enough to put in the freezer, and the square foot garden just did not give me enough to put in the freezer. Now, if you're starting out and you just got you and your husband, or maybe a couple of kids, and you just want to have enough to eat on hand and not freeze, the square foot garden might be just for you. But the thing I'm getting at mainly is start small. I started this garden, the main garden out here, the kitchen garden. I started it in, I think, 2011 with one bed, and it's grown. It's grown every year. Last year I added the big greenhouse, I added the melon patch, and I added the bee garden. So every year I add to it, and I'll continue to add to it until I just can't handle all the gardens anymore, and then I'll start subtracting some. In fact, I did get rid of one this year by combining it into one bigger garden. But that is the main thing. Start small, learn as you go, and come up with a design. Think about this winter or how you want your garden to look. If you go with raised beds, no more than 4 feet across. In fact, I stretch my arm out, and if I can't reach almost to the other side, then I make it smaller. I actually like 3-foot beds better than I do 4, because I can reach across them a lot easier without having to really bend and stretch. The length can be anything you want. I prefer 6 to 8 feet, because if you have to go all the way down to the end to get to the other side, there's a good chance you'll try jumping across or walking across the bed, and that compacts your soil for a raised bed, which you don't want to do. Your owls should probably be 3 feet between beds. You can get by with smaller, but if you're going to be using a wheelbarrow, then I would say 3 feet are as wide as your wheelbarrow is. And you don't have to do that on all sides. Like if you've got like 4 raised beds, you can have 2 feet between 2 of them, and then 3 feet between the other ones, just so you can get in to manage 2 beds at a time with a wheelbarrow. And another thing is, your beds, they're best to be at least 8 to 12 inches or deeper, depending upon your crops. If you're doing lettuce, you can get by with the 6 inches and stuff. But if you're doing carrots and stuff, then you need a whole 12 inches. So I find that going as deep as you can afford to go is best, because we're not getting any younger. And the higher those beds are, it means the less you have to bend over. And believe me, as you get older, that is a plus. But then you got, again, remember, you've got to fill those beds with soil. And you don't use your soil out of your garden. Don't use that. Not unless you have it tested and you know exactly what's in it and whether you have to mend it or not. They sell potting soil. They sell soil specially made for raised beds. And that's what I used in the greenhouse, and I absolutely love it. And if I replace these beds, which is one of the things I'm thinking about doing, I will be using that type of soil in these. You can also make your own soil. You can use equal parts of compost peat moss or coconut coir, and vermiculite. And you can mix that all together, and that's basically what the raised bed soil mix is. If you read the ingredients, they just do all the mixing for you. And to me, it's worth the extra little bit of money to have them do it. You determine how much you need. You'll take your length of your bed times the width of the bed times the height of it in feet. And 1 cubic yard is equal to 27 cubic feet. So you have to do a little bit of math to find out how much you need. And a lot of times, if you buy your own raised beds already pre-made, they will tell you in the instructions how many bags of soil or how many cubic feet of soil you need to fill that bed. And that brings us to watering. You have to be close to a water supply. And when I first started this, I had to drag a hose all the way from the house all the way out here. And that's about 200 feet of hose to reach all the way to the end. And then last year I had them put in a, what's it called? Frost resistant hydrant out here. So I now can water everything with just 2 hoses. One connected to the green system goes to the greenhouse, and the black system comes out here. And there's different ways to do it. You can take your wand and walk around and water each bed individually, or you can hook up a drip system. Now the drip system is more convenient, and it waters down at the soil level, which keeps your leaves from getting wet. But it can get kind of expensive, and it's not something you have to put in the first year. In fact, I have not got a drip system in any of mine yet. It's one of the things that's on the list to be done, but I haven't got around to doing it. Another way to do it is to get oilies, and these are just terracotta pots that you plant. You actually plant, you bury them into the raised beds, and you leave the tops of them, and you fill the top of the jar, which is above ground. You fill that with water, and the water leaks through the terracotta and waters the plant around the root. The only problem I have with those, I don't have any. I tried it once. They take up a lot of space, and my space is premium. I want it for veggies, and so I don't use those, but that is a way you can do it. And just remember that if you let your seeds dry out while they're germinating, they die. They need that water. So you have to water almost daily at the beginning when they're first germinating. You have to keep them moist but not soggy. So your watering demands can be, depending on how you garden, can be very demanding. Like my bucket garden, and how the heat of the sun, I have to water that every day, sometimes twice a day to keep them going. Inside the greenhouse sometimes has to be watered twice a day in the hot summer, especially before you get the shade cloth up. So you have to learn to listen to your plants. They will tell you when they need water. And it's best to water early morning. That way the ground's not hot and you're not putting water onto hot ground and carrying that hot water down to the bottom of your roots. They like to be watered in the morning or late at evening, but if you water at evening, make sure you do not get any on the leaves, because a wet leaf overnight is not good. Another thing that I find really helpful is to moss everything. After the seedlings come up, not before, after they come up, put some moss down in the area between the seedlings. Don't pile it on top of the seedlings, and let them have enough space so that they have a little air room to breathe. You don't want the moss right next to them, because that can cause the little guys to rot. Always, as like I said before, water the ground and not the leaves. Another thing you need to do if you're thinking about making a garden is to know what zone you're in. Know when your first and last frost dates are, how long of a growing season you have, and what grows good in your area. Now you can find this out online by looking at different things, talking to your neighbors or other gardeners, joining gardening clubs, talking to the county extension agent. These are all good places to go to find out what grows in your area. And then plant what grows in your area. Decide what you want to plant. What does your family eat? The first year out, don't be planting spaghetti squash if your family's never tried spaghetti squash before. Plant something that you know they will eat, and that way you'll help get the kids and your husband or your wife in on gardening. If they find out, oh gosh, I can grow a whole bunch of lettuce from one package, and that package costs the same as going to the store and buying mixed lettuces, and I get 1 or 2 servings out of the one I bought at the grocery store, but from this pack of seeds, I can eat lettuce every day for 2 to 3 weeks from one planting. You get them on board that away with something they really like to eat, and they're going to be wanting to help or at least encourage you to get out there and garden. So another thing is, start with just a few of your favorite vegetables. Don't go crazy the first year. Start with something that you know grows well in your area. And then as you get more experience, you can expand. And as you get more equipment, you can expand. Like when I start talking about equipment, I'm talking about things like plastic covers for the beginning and end of the season to extend your raised beds longer. I'm talking about bug cloths that go over the beds to keep your bad insects out. Now, you can't use that on all the plants. If it needs to be, a plant needs to have something to pollinate it, you can't put a bug cover over it until after it's already been pollinated. So that's a little tricky at times, especially with things like zucchini and stuff, because the vine borer loves to get in there, but that's also about the same time as when they start blooming. So you have to kind of be careful so that you don't ruin your crop by putting it on too soon and not being able to get the pollinators, or putting it on too late and getting the vine borers. So you kind of got to watch what you're doing as far as when you put the crop. That's something you learn as you go. And you can always hand pollinate if you have. Like last year, I had a real big problem with squash bugs, and I didn't have on hand a big enough piece of insect barrier to put over the whole melon patch. So I lost a lot of the melons before they were completely ready to harvest. But I did get a good harvest of pumpkins and watermelon and butternut squash. Did not get any cantaloupe because of the squash bugs. So one of the first things I've done already is ordered a large piece of insect cloth to go over my melon patch next year. But I will wait until after they are pollinated, because if I look back at my notes, I find that they pollinated and had set their fruit a good 2 to 3 weeks before the squash bugs came in. So I know next year, put that on. As soon as I see fruit forming, put it on. It means that once the fruit has formed and the flower has dropped, it means that they are pollinated and they are ready to go. Another thing is, go out to your garden every day and just set, if nothing else. If you set, you'll look at it and you'll decide, oh, I need a place to set. So like last year, I had an old table before that I had here, but the chairs were falling apart. So last year I got this table, and it's been really great. It's a lot bigger than the table I had before. The seats don't blow around because they're attached. And there's just little things like that you have to think about. Because the table I had before, I would find it down in the woods a lot because the wind would just pick it up and blow it. It was that lightweight. The chairs would be covered in water because they had that curved seat, and you couldn't sit down when you wanted to. So you have to think about the designs, yeah. And this picnic table is heavy enough, the wind's not gonna blow it. It stays clean. It's got the wood seats, it's got 2 boards next to each other so the water drains off between the cracks. So it's always dry, it's always good to set on. And you might think about how you want your garden to look as far as decorations. I love scarecrows, so every year I buy another scarecrow and put out here. And sometimes I retire them, sometimes I redress them. And it just depends on if I can find them on sale or not. But I love scarecrows, so this garden has scarecrows in it. The garden, my swing garden has a bottle tree in it. The meditation garden has all the stepping stones and the hammock and a table and chair. Not all of them have a table. The angel garden does not have any chairs, but it can be seen from the side porch, which does have chairs. So you might say it has chairs. So everything has its own theme. And by adding themes, you add interest to the garden when it's not a garden, when there's nothing blooming. And another thing is, everybody thinks a garden has to have flowers. You can have a Zen garden, which does not have any flowers in it. It's just got rocks, sand, and gravel. So it goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody has their own definition of what a garden is. Now, last of all is the harvest. We already touched on it a little bit by saying to make sure you come out here every day and check and harvest things, because if you leave them go to seed, it signals plants that's gone. So it's important to actually harvest what you eat. Research it, find out when you're supposed to harvest it, and then do some research and find out how you're supposed to harvest it and how you're supposed to preserve it. Because you go to all this work, you want to eat the food, you want to preserve it. Hi, baby. How's your eye this morning? I had to treat her eyes again. They were starting to get bad. Come here, Stripe. She's slowly coming over here. See if she's got a cold again. Anyway, so you can harvest either by canning, freezing, dehydrating. Those are the main way of harvesting, of preserving the food. I do not like to can. I had bad experience when I was younger. My parents used to can all the time, and they kept them in the cellar, and they would not be that appetizing, and I would get sick a lot. And I know my parents were doing the right thing as far as canning. They were just not storing it really that great afterwards. And then when she got her freezer, a miracle, I wasn't sick as much anymore. And to me, it might not have been, but to me it was the freezing versus the canning. So I don't can. You have to be so careful when you can. Follow directions exactly. Make sure you pressure can some, water can the others. And I don't remember my mom ever pressure canning anything. I always remember the water baths. It's the little sweetie. She wants to say hi. This is Stripe. And then there's the dehydrating, which I really enjoy because I can dehydrate a lot of stuff and just put it in the pantry, vacuum pack it into a bag or into a jar, and it's in the pantry. I don't have to worry about it. So research how you want to save your food, and make sure you eat what you grow. And remember, start out small and slowly work your way up. Like this little kitten slowly working its way up my leg. So, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon if you would. And remember, dream big and follow that dream. And see if I can show you this little kitten on my boot. She's determined she's going to get held tonight. I'm going to take her in. I'm going to treat her eye and get her well again. So, I will see you again on Thursday. Bye, everybody. Okay, get off, sweetie. Good girl.